I'm Becky Fawcett, a mom by adoption, an infertile blonde, a female founder, and a businesswoman. Podcast rulebooks will say that your introduction must always be the same for every episode. My guess is mine won't be. For most of my life, I tried to be perfect and do what everyone else was doing. And then I tried to have children. That's the plot twist. Now I look for any opportunity to be different. I am an outspoken advocate who wants to change the world, and this sometimes gets me into trouble, but for the most part, it helps me make real connections with real people. Welcome to my podcast, The Fawcett Report. I'm so glad you're here. I want to introduce you to my friend and podcast guest, Jack, who is the Finding Next guru. I'm not going to read his whole bio because I want this to be conversational today, and we've got so many exciting things to talk about. But his philosophy in his career work in finding next with people is simple and profound. What's stopping you? Jack, that leads into one of our infamous conversations, but he just doesn't help businesses and individuals with their next step. What he does is he helps them to find the right step and to help them unlock their potential and use their potential to guide them towards the success that they want to have. Welcome, Jack. I'm so glad you're here.
This is delighted to be here. You're one of my favorite people in the world.
Oh my gosh. You're one of my favorite people. And we're going to get to it, but you're part of my founder's story of one of the greatest things I have done in my life and probably will ever do in my life. And this is just so exciting. So tell everybody, do you remember how we met? I want to say 25 years we've known each other.
We were working together on a similar client. I was doing advertising. You were doing PR. It was a luggage company out of Philadelphia. And strangely enough, the Philadelphia connection, we literally lived down the street from each other, which we didn't realize for many, many years. And I think we had coffee one day and you were telling me your story, and tell the story and I'll tell you what I told you.
We had coffee for the first time in person, and it was right when I moved to New York, and we were blocks away, which was very funny of all the things to happen. And you asked me this question, which I found at the time so offensive. I was so offended. I was taken aback. And do you remember what you asked me? Because I remember. You were complimenting me on one hand and telling me I was a great publicist. But then you said, when you're done doing this, what's next? And I was like, this is the rudest guy I've ever met in my life. What is he kidding me? You were so interesting because when I think I told you I was offended, and you said, no, there's something more to you than just this. And I don't know exactly what it is, but tell me. And so you were already doing this job before. This is 19 years ago, we had this coffee. And I told you about my struggle to become a mother and adopting Jane and my idea for helpusadopt.org, which to those listeners, this is what I now do full time. And then you asked me, this sounds pretty great. When are you going to do this? And I said, I don't know, someday. And then you said,
what are you waiting for?
What are you waiting for? And I walked out of that coffee meeting and I went home. And in the next 48 hours, I wrote the business plan for helpusadopt.org. That was February of 2007. I opened the bank account and incorporated in April of 2007. And it was, what are you waiting for? It was a pretty good moment. And Jack and I, for those listening, we have needlepoint pillows of this on our sofas. Not really, but we should. So you were doing this work way back when, and maybe you knew what you were doing, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah, what's interesting about your reaction is it's one of the goals that I have with every one of my clients, and it makes them crazy, is I want to give them heartburn. And they look at me, are you crazy? What do you want to give me heartburn? I want to make you nervous. I want to give you an upset stomach to drive you crazy, to motivate you to do something that you are not probably intending to do, to get you outside of your comfort zone. That's what I do for a living. My positioning is I see things other people miss. And I wasn't smart enough to create that line. That line was developed over many decades. And it was created because clients would come to me and they would say, Jack, I don't know how you think. You create unbelievable perspectives and strategies and tactics. I may not buy it every time, but I know I couldn't come up with what you come up with. And it took me a long time to create that line, but it's very accurate that I see things other people miss. And I think that's what I saw in you. You had it. You had the understanding of it. You just were missing the push, the nudge, the heartburn to get there and go home and take a bottle of Maalox, but starting to write that plan. And that's what you did.
Yeah. And one of the things you said to me when I said, and I remember this conversation like it was yesterday, was you said, when are you going to do this? I'm like, I don't know, someday. And you said, you're one of the most capable people I've worked with. You're very good at what you do. And you have to trust in yourself and trust in your ability. It took me a very long time in my life and my career to do that. I want to also say right here is, I think also as a woman, we're not allowed to say we're really good at stuff unless it's tennis. And I don't mean to be sarcastic, but you're not allowed to. Now, if a man says they're very good at their job, I'm the best out there, you slap him on the shoulder and say, we're giving you a raise. And if a woman says, I'm the best there is, she's not allowed. Now, all of a sudden, she's full of herself and egotistical. So for a very long time, and I never think I'm the best there is, but I'm good. And I know that. But a long time, I always downplayed that. I always did, because women aren't allowed to say it. And I actually was really good at tennis. I played Division III in college. I wasn't top of the team, but I'm good at that too. I digress. But this is really it. I didn't trust in my ability. And I will always be forever grateful for you, because look at my career now. And I love that we're still friends. And I credit you with part of my founder's story, and that you're here today, because I know you have a lot of good things to say for men and women. But in my life, I really see women who are struggling with this. And I shouldn't say that. I see some men who struggle with this of, I'm stuck.
Yeah,
I don't know where to go.
What's interesting about that, let me piggyback on in terms of what you're saying. And again, I wish I had this when I got started, and I wish I had you to help me. But the three things that shaped my life and my career, it's exactly what you're saying, is that you're smarter than you think, you know more than you know, and you can do more than you think. Those are the three things that I found out upside down, backwards, inside out. It took me, again, a long time. And the value prop that I try to bring to people like you and my clients is the understanding that you've got something. You just got to unleash it. And that's what you have. Everybody's got a talent. The ability to differentiate is what drives brands and people in terms of separating them out from something else. You had a vision, and it just needed a little bit of a push to get that vision in terms of reality. So I'm gobsmacked that I had a little bit to do with it. And it took really a long time for me to hear that story. I never, ever knew it.
That's because I was a lunatic trying to get this thing off the ground, but we've done that. But at any rate, one of the other things is trusting in your ability. Is that, as I said in my intro, I do have a very strong personality. I have a lot of opinions. I am brutally honest. And a lot of people don't like that. You start to, I think, in the career world, and maybe this is part of what you do, like maybe I was in the wrong fit, right? Because when I started this organization, and in PR, like in PR, you have to play more of a polite game. But I think when you're doing advocacy work, I always thought if I'd only been a lawyer, right, being outspoken and opinionated and brutally honest would have been great. But I was able to use all these things that people had told me I have to hide a lot of my career to now do the work that I was destined to do. And I think that was what you were saying, in that you help people. What do you want to do, and how are you going to get there? And maybe it's not a good fit what you think you're going to do. Like, how do you harness your exact skills, good or bad, to fit something that could really bring you joy?
See, the problem that most people have, and again, this is what I do, is that anybody that's stuck in their career, stuck in their life, they can't get out of it because they don't know. They can't execute the strategy. And what the career coaches and the templates and the books and the webinars are all doing is they're giving them the roadmap. The problem with the roadmap is Once you come to the end of the road, what do I now do? I can't bring that story to life. And that's what I help people do. I give them the answer that they're not getting from anybody else. And that's what the frustration is. So it's the ability to dig deep and see inside of that person and understand who they are and who they're not. I'll give you a perfect example. This one makes me crazy because it's real. I was working with a woman and I said, what are your goals and what are you looking to do? And she says, I want to make a lot of money. And I said, all right, great. So does everybody else. Big deal. But she goes, you know what? I'm smart enough to know that I can't go to Wall Street. I'm not an investment banker type. So I really think sales is the best vehicle for me. And I said, that's a really good perspective. So we started talking, and it turns out that this woman is an introvert in an extroverted category, and she hates people. So the ability to understand what makes you, which is part of my process, understanding that where her goals and her personality registered tilt. Okay, tilting is, forget windmills, but tilt, I created that expression, registering tilt from the old pinball machines. When you shake the pinball machine, the machine tilts and it shuts down. That's what happens with people. They don't understand that their personality has to be in sync. It has to match with their goals. And that's why so many people can't get out of their own way. They don't know how to do it because the world is giving them the monetization of solving the problem as opposed to solving the problem on a one-to-one basis. Anyway, that's my pitch.
It's true. And that's the other thing is that sometimes people think, I thought I wanted to go to college for a business major way back when, because that's what they told you needed to do. And I saw boys doing it and I was told girls don't do that. And so I thought, I'm going to do that. I took economics my freshman year, thought I understood it, went into the first exam and got a 42.
Whoa.
And I was like, that's not even getting it. So I withdrew because this is it. Like, I wasn't so sure of myself back then, but I knew that wasn't going to work. By withdrawing, I stuck myself in summer school that summer because I needed to make up the class. But it was such a good thing because I realized I don't think my brain works that way. I don't think that's where I need to be for 4 years. Obviously, with a 42 out of 100, that was not going to happen. But I think that takes a certain wherewithal to say, okay, I stink at this and let me redirect. And I remember my father saying to me, who was an academic, who went to MIT and then had his PhD in math from NYU. I remember him saying, hello, what are you doing now if you're not going to be a business major? And I said, you know what? I think I'm going to be an American Studies major because I really liked the major. It was history, art, literature, all rolled up. Everything I loved, all rolled up into one. And I loved the advisor. And he goes, what are you going to do with that? And I go, you know what, Dad? I'm going to have fun and enjoy what I'm learning for 4 years. I'm going to use my personality and drive to get a job. And he's like, I don't think so. And I said, I'm going to do it. And P.S., Tom Clancy, American Studies major. And he was like, if you can write like Tom Clancy, you don't even have to go to college. So that was how that conversation went. But it was true. It was taking this risk and being confident. And I had no idea that I could get a job based on my personality. But I think some people are also risk averse and other people are not. And for whatever reason, risk doesn't always scare me if it's calculated. But how do you teach someone that? If someone comes to you and they're just like, I am stuck and I can't get out of my own way. And I would have stayed in that econ class and then I would have had an F on my transcript because I wouldn't have understood that I could get out and figure another path. What do you tell people? Because some people don't know how to do that.
You know what? I hate the cliches, but in this case, it's very applicable. You can't lead a horse to water, okay? They've got to want to go by themselves. I deal in strange analogies, but it's AA. You know what? If you are not ready, there is nothing that's going to prepare you to do it. So the ones that are ready, they are the ones that can be helped. Unless you have an amazing person like a Becky Fawcett that has such energy and vision and foresight that she's able to do it for herself. But there's only one of you, okay? There's a heck of a lot of other people that don't have that drive and understanding. and that perspective. It's very rare. Let me share a story, because I have a similar story in terms of my father. My father dictated what I was going to do when I got out of college. When I started college, he said, "You're going to be an accounting major." I go, "Accounting?" He says, "Your uncle's an accountant. You should be an accountant. It's a nice, safe career for a crazy kid like you." I majored in accounting for a year. Hated it, hated it. The only thing I walked out, I know LIFO and FIFO. That's my extent of my accounting background, right? Last in, first out. For some God knows reason, I gave it up. But then when I started my second year, I found out I was an accounting major again. 2 weeks later, I quit. I started majoring in everything that was offered. I was a psychology major, a sociology major, a management major, finally a marketing major. Marketing gave me a subset of advertising. When I started taking advertising courses, I said, "Oh my God, my personality hated everything that I majored in on a 90% level. But 10% of all of those pieces would fit into my personality. I am a very logical, linear, organized, disciplined person," which was advertising. The marketing, the psychology, the sociology fit my personality, because another story, but I told kids at Columbia, the reason I got into advertising, because I can manipulate people's minds. What a fascinating category, career to be in, right? I said, that's me. I'm never an accounting major, but part of my personality is very logical. The other side, I bill myself as a schizophrenic personality. One side, logical, linear. The other side, crazy, lunatic, creative. But all of those pieces came together that, again, I wasn't smart enough to articulate, this is the direction I should be in. For me, my career, and to answer your question, a lot of people need to understand what's out there. They can't create it themselves. That's what I help them do. I go through a very disciplined process and crazy, wild questions to drag out what the essence of their personality is. It's got to be apples to apples. Most people are apples and oranges. And that's the hard part, because they can't do it themselves.
I have a couple thoughts here. So I'm going to go the first one because I think the second one leads us into more conversations. But I want to use this example. And I always like to use these examples with myself, because I do think that some people see my career and think, she got lucky.
Yeah, easy.
Look how good it was. Before you met me as a publicist, I was director of marketing at Philadelphia Magazine. It was a dream job. I was the youngest director of marketing they'd ever hired. I'd worked there for 3 years before I got this job, launching and running a separate magazine that they had. And I thought this was it. How lucky am I? Two things. Number one, before the job went south, I realized very quickly, crap, this is not what I think I wanted to do. Because as an advertising person, I was in the trenches with clients. I was listening to what their problems were. I was able to say, I can help you solve that through this ad. I can help you with your copy. Like, I can help you. You don't see it clearly, but I see that clearly. That's a puzzle. And I loved watching them find success. And I loved also saying, I can't help you solve that problem with this ad. You should take the money and put it here or go on vacation, because it won't work. And that's how I did it with PR too. I was always like, I'm not a magician. That's not something I can solve. When my job went south because my boss decided she no longer wanted me there, my life became miserable. I didn't know what to do. In Philadelphia, I was at the top. There's nowhere else to go, in my opinion. And I quit before she fired me. I should have let her fire me. Older, wiser girl would have told you, stick it out, let her fire you. But I didn't. And I quit. And I tell people this story all the time. I let her take away my belief in my ability, because she just decided I was no good. She didn't have that power. And I sat on my couch for my 2 months of severance and non-compete, and I clicked. And I got myself out of that hole, because that's what I'm good at. But it took me a few months to do it. And I do like to share that story, because it seems stupid to say she was not allowed to take my ability away. And quite frankly, she didn't. She just was threatened and wanted me gone. Now, funny story is she ended up hiring me back in like a year to be the publicist at Philadelphia Magazine. So that's funny, right? But It took me a while to get there. But how do you help people deal with that? I mean, I always tell people who are like, I just got fired. I've told friends over the years, I'm like, oh my God, this is actually the greatest thing that's ever happened to you. And they think I'm nuts. And I'm like, I almost got fired. And it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I found a path that I never would have found. I never would have started my PR firm, which never would have led me to New York, which never would have led me to all of it. And how do you convince people that when these horrible things happen,
There's many ways to do it. Yeah, it really depends on the person's personality, their willingness to listen and believe that they are not isolated in this world. There are hundreds of people that have been fired. Okay. And one of the greatest examples is Mike Bloomberg. Mike Bloomberg was fired, kicked out of his job, cut a couple of years later, one of the wealthiest billionaires in the world after getting fired. In the advertising business, it's a badge of honor. If you haven't been fired, you got no credibility, because what you're doing is, again, it depends upon the person, the job, the career, the focus that you're going after. And historically, people were in lifelong careers. That has been over for decades and decades. There is no longer lifelong employment. Every single day, you've got to perform. It's like an actor. You're on stage every single day, and every performance is your last performance. And that's what you have to do. One of the things that I try to instill in people in terms of your job, what makes a good employee? What makes a good employee is not the work that you do. It's making your boss look good. That's your job. If you understand the mindset of corporate America, it's making your boss look good in hopes that you don't have a Becky Fawcett boss, that you've got a reasonable boss, because their job is to make their boss look good. And it translates over and over again. So again, the ability that I try to instill is look at the case histories, look at the number of people that were fired and bounced back. Look at the amount of new businesses and careers and industries and ideas that were created. Look at Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs would never be Steve Jobs if he wasn't kicked out of his own company. Okay.
Yes, he's adopted. Steve Jobs is adopted. I love him.
Exactly.
Love him.
Right? Yeah. He should still be alive today. Again, geniuses are crazy by design, right?
Yeah.
But again, the understanding is what you do and I do is very similar. We don't do 10 steps to success. We educate people through stories and analogies and examples in hopes that somebody's going to say, geez, that's interesting. Maybe that can relate to me. Storytelling is the number one vehicle that gets people off the couch and gets them to understand and be relatable. That's why 99% of what I do is storytelling. And I got a lot of stories.
Listen, that's how I sold advertising. Was I never started a meeting by coming in and saying, let me tell you what I'm selling. I want to learn about your business. I want to hear how you got into this. I want to hear about you. And then I started a PR firm, which is storytelling. And now I do Help Us Adopt, which is storytelling. It's my own story, launched it. I now tell the stories of families. Like, it's so powerful. My kids, it's very funny. I mortify them because, so for those listening, I live in New York. I love fashion. Sometimes people think that I work in the fashion industry because they'll say, your outfit's great. What do you do? And I'm like, you're never going to guess what I do. I run a nonprofit that helps people adopt children. But when I'm out and about, you see someone who's stylish, I will literally stop someone on the street and I do this with my hand. I'm like, I need to know everything that's going on here. And I need to know what your story is because you're amazing. My kids dive for cover when this happens. They're like, oh my God. Brooke will look at me and be like, I wanted to die. But the difference is this. I know how they react, these people who I stop, because you get dressed for yourself when you dress like that. When you're out on a ledge with your fashion sense of style, it's not for anybody else, but it's you. And it's part of who you are. And you get dressed in the morning to tell a story. Maybe it makes you feel good, but you're not getting dressed for someone else when you do that. And I love knowing the why. And it's so great. My kids are mortified by the storytelling all the time. because I talk to strangers, but I'm fascinated by it, always have been. I think this ties into what you do because I always use this example, and I do want to get into the mom category in 2 seconds. And I think one of the first things before we even get there is I want to talk about this because I think it's the elephant in the room when you talk about getting fired or you talk about changing careers and whatever is the salary, right? Like you lose your income, or how do you do this? And I've now done it twice in my career, and I will totally be transparent. When I quit Philly Mag, I had a small severance package. And I knew that I had to solve this problem within that. And I was married, so I had a husband who had health insurance, fully transparent. And yeah, did that make it a little easy? Made it a little easier, but we were young and my salary was not an add-on. My salary was a necessity. So once that severance package ran out, we were going to be in deep, you know what. And then the other thing is this, and I want you to talk about this. Help Us Adopt was a side hustle for me at first, because there was a lot of risk involved with that. I was doing something that the world hadn't seen before, and I was starting, and not a moneymaker, it was a nonprofit. So I did it as a side hustle while I had my PR firm. And a lot of people don't know that because it was very risky. And honestly, I launched it in 2007, and then we had the financial crisis of 2008 in New York. So there was that. But let's talk about that. Do you ever see clients who say, like, I can't leave my job because I'm the breadwinner, or I provide insurance for my family, or I have this salary, but I hate it and I need to do more. I think there's more in me. And how do I bridge that?
I have something called cross-pollination. I invented that term. I stole it from the bees, but I use it in marketing and advertising. And the cross-pollination I discovered, again, quite by accident, because I was working with a client, and I think part of the story where, I came out of the advertising business. I was living with a woman. She passed away from cancer, went to Sloan Kettering, did 6 years there. It was like doing, in jail a little bit, but it wasn't my personality at all. Working for a protocol-driven company when you're living in a creative environment registers tilt, right? So I came out of that and I said to myself, within my skill set, what else can I do? And I went to the best in the business. There's one story. I went to this woman, and during our conversation, highly recommended, she found out that I was doing triathlons. And she said, geez, isn't part of the triathlon a swim? I said, yeah, swim, bike, run. She goes, I've always wanted to learn how to swim. And I said, you know what? Why don't we barter a deal? I'll teach you how to swim and you figure out what to do with my career. She says, it's great. I'll do it, right? P.S. She learned how to swim. She never figured out what to do with my career. I found, right? Classic story, classic Jack Maggot story. Cut to many times later and dinners later, and meet with a friends of mine. And they say to me, you know what? We've got an interesting project we want to talk to you about. And I said, I'll do it. She goes, you don't even know what it is. I said, it doesn't matter. If it's interesting, it's from you, I'll do it. Anyway, what happened was my background was doing strategic assessments, building and revitalizing brands. The project that they talked to me about was a kid that was in his second year of Brooklyn Law School, whose father thought he was financially irresponsible, and they needed somebody to fix the kid. I spoke to the father, I spoke to the kid, the light bulb went off, and I said, oh my God, this is what I do. I can do a strategic assessment and analysis of both the father and the kid and come up with a recommendation, the analysis, the research, the background, and come up with a solution to solve this problem. So for me, the cross-pollination came from building and revitalizing brands to building and revitalizing people. The ability to sit down with a person, and in advertising, as most people know, creating a unique selling proposition is really difficult. What I do when you can't find a differentiation, what I do is I create a disease. I create a disease that only me or my client has the antidote for. So telling people, if you stay the path that you're in, look at what's going to happen. You're going to get a disease. You're probably going to get fired. So I'm trying to scare them enough to say, you can pay me now or pay me later. You can either start planning now in anticipation, which is the best time to start, And the worst time is when you get fired, because then they're a basket case. So you try to get people early enough on to give them a perspective of how things play out and what the roadmap looks like. And if you don't address it now, it's going to be twice as bad later on. But it's hard because you rarely get those people at that moment. You always get them when they're in desperation mode. And then you try to help them by saying, I've helped a lot of people. Again, I see things other people miss. I'll give you a very different perspective than you would get from anybody else, or you could create yourself. But it's all timing. And it's hard because what you and I are trying to do is very similar. We're trying to get the word out. People are myopic in terms of they live in a bubble. Some people can have peripheral vision. For me, I do total 360 vision. And that's what's different. You do the same thing. You have an understanding that people are going to react in a very different way. You got to have enough latitude to say, I got a lot of tools in my chest. I'm going to teach this person the way they want to be taught. That's one of my crazy philosophies, that I never, ever try to treat people the way I want to be treated. Totally wrong. You got to treat people the way they want to be treated. And that's what marketing and sales and all the things that we all do, that's the perspective that very few people have.
So quickly, I just want to reiterate this one thing that you just said. People hiring someone like you to work with them is like going to a therapist. Okay.
Absolutely.
I know most people, if you walk down the street, you're like, you should really go talk to a therapist. I don't need one. And then when something happens in their life, getting into a therapist is a whole different ballgame. Finding the right one is a whole different ballgame. And now maybe they don't have a solution for 3 to 6 months if they're lucky, and they really needed one yesterday. And I think that's what you're saying, is that anybody who's listening to this or who knows you and hears about someone like you, is that just by talking to you doesn't mean they have to quit their job and start something new tomorrow. And that perhaps if there's any inkling in their brain that maybe I'm worth more than this, maybe I'm destined for something different, I really hate being an accountant. I'd like to be a dog trainer to the stars, right? Like that they should work with someone like you the same way they work with a therapist, to just talk about it, because maybe the answer becomes, you know what? I hate being an accountant, but I make so much money and have such a good vacation schedule. I'm going to live with it. Great. But if all of a sudden you're 60 years old and you're like, I never took a chance, what did you miss out on?
Yeah.
And I think people wouldn't hire you until it's bad. That's not good either.
It's hard because you want to help people. And my mother would always say, God helps those who help themselves. And it's all the cliches, but cliches are cliches because they're very true. And you can't motivate somebody that's not motivatable. You can't sell anything to anybody. The advertising and what we both do is we create a proposition. We're putting the information out there for you to either accept or reject. If it's in your nature to want to do something, whether to be part of your organization or to help yourself or help your career or other people, that's only the time that people are ready. And it's all about the individual, the timing, the ability. So many women that you know of, that I know of, I've been out of the workforce for so many years. How can my background equate to what's going on in the workforce today? And there's so many ways to think about it. And that's where creative people, like in my world, in your world, they can create ideas that bring the basic information to life and spin it. Right? You're a spinner. You can spin the information that makes it look good and interesting. Somebody that manages a household, that's an unbelievable talent to go into a company.
I'm so glad.
Right?
I'm so glad you're mentioning this, because this is what I want us to talk about in the last bit of time that we have left, is this mom syndrome. And quite frankly, to be modern in 2025, it is becoming a dad syndrome too, because not a lot, but some men are staying home because their wife out earns them. And in my group of friends, the exact point that you just made. So I either have friends who stopped working to be stay-at-home moms, and when they wanted to do the back to school during the school hours, they were like, "Why? I'm only want a job on school hours." So they were creating a criteria that an employer's not going to love. So working with someone like you, that would have been a great person. I try to get my friends to talk to you because I get it. You don't want to work 9 to 5, 6 days a week. I get that because your kids are home by 3:30 or 4. But let's figure out something that you could do part-time that would work. And maybe it's only 2 days a week, but that gives you something. And it's usually not always about money. Like sometimes with the moms going back, it's for them. And that is my next thing. My friends who have done it throughout high school and now their kids are in college and they have an empty house and they're going, holy crap, what did I do? And why am I in this situation? And where do I go from here? And I said exactly what you said to a friend months ago, maybe a year ago. I can't even remember. As I said this, you ran a household with your husband's job and his travel, and you raised these 2 kids. And I have never seen 2 kids have more sports stuff and theater stuff and music stuff and everything. Why don't you look into being an office manager somewhere? Right. And she was like, I don't want to do that in like a boring company. I go, I wasn't saying boring company. I was saying maybe an interior design firm, something you love. Find a smaller company where you could say, I can manage schedules and logistics, but that's language, right? Schedules and logistics. Who doesn't want a problem solver who knows logistics? And I just think it's reframing, but I see this all the time with my friends. I've tried to send people to you over the years too, where people have been like, I don't know where to go. I'm like, just talk to Jeff. Just talk to him. But they're scared to sometimes. And I'm like, oh, for God's sake, just call him. He's fine. But that's it.
He doesn't bite.
Yeah.
You know, but again, that's where, for me, the cross-pollination comes into play. Anybody can do the background analysis. Anybody can do the research. It's what you do with that information. How do you bring it to life? How do you create an interesting perspective based upon the track record of the person? A lot of these things sound so common and so obvious, but they're not. People are so myopic in their life and their bubble that they can't get out of their own way. One of my obstacles is that I had a potential client. It was a kid. It wasn't a kid. It was an adult who's like in his 30s, who unfortunately his mother was a shrink. And this kid went to shrink after shrink, life coach after life coach, and the kid was never, ever helped. So a friend of mine introduced me to him. Kid fell in love with me. And he says, it's my money. Like, I don't need to get approval. Of course, the mother, who was a certified psychiatrist, basically said, where is Jack's credentials? Where is his diploma? You know what? My diploma is 50 years of experience solving problems. I can help your son. But she totally refused it because her myopic vision in her life, if I didn't have that diploma, I was no good. P.S. The kid is still screwed up. And he's still going to shrink after shrink.
Back to my failing economics freshman year in college, people say to me, how did you learn how to build the helpusadopt.org? Do you have an MBA? I have an American Studies degree, but I have common sense, a lot of it, a good gut, and I'm a problem solver. It's so funny to me. I once had an article in the Wall Street Journal, and I got an ink drawing way back when. Ink drawing of my face in the Wall Street Journal. And I had a friend who has an MBA from a very prestigious school. And she called me and was like, okay, so I'm a little annoyed. And I was like, what? She goes, I'm very happy for you with your article, but really, you have a bachelor's in American Studies. And I was like, yep. But I was doing worthwhile work. And I'm so proud of that ink drawing. But this is it. Sometimes you find what's meant for you. Because you do, and you do the work, and you are willing to take the risk and put yourself out there and look at something differently. And sometimes it pays off. Sometimes it doesn't, but sometimes it pays off.
Yeah.
And you don't always need a degree. Now, you have to be reasonable, right? Like, I can't be an accountant. Cannot. I'd have to go back to school. I don't really want to. But there are certain things, like when people tell me, like, I want to do X, and I'm like, how? Tell me how that looks. It's because I want to be Steve Jobs too, but I'm not. And I want to be Michael Bloomberg. That was a pretty good getting fired story, but I'm not. But I can be Becky Fawcett in my own way.
I'm going to share one of my philosophies that says, I steal from the best. You don't need to reinvent everything in the world. So I'm hoping that you're going to steal this from me. And it's
Okay.
exactly what we're talking about. You don't need a diploma. All you need to do is to care. It's pretty powerful. And that's what you do. And hopefully that's what people see that I do. You don't need those credentials. You don't need the MBA. All you need to do is to care. And so many people don't have that piece of DNA. They really don't care about anybody else. You happen to be one of the most caring individuals that I've ever come across. And it's rare. And you know that. And suck it up and appreciate the compliment, because I know you hate that. But it's true.
It's funny because, again, girls were told, maybe I was the only girl who was told this, but you're not allowed to be great. And I do tell people when they're like, did you know you were going to do this in your lifetime? First of all, I did not. I did not know that I was going to adopt my children. And I did not know that struggle was going to be real for me. But I will tell you this. I did dream about being great in high school and middle school. And I watched other people do what I thought was considered great. And I wanted that feeling. And I never knew how it was going to pan out, but I wanted it. I wanted to be great at something, always did. I just didn't know what it was. And it's something that was always in me to do. And I'm so lucky that this is what I get to be great at that makes a difference in this world and the great people I get to meet. But I think that it was always there. And people used to make fun of me when I would say that out loud. But you have to stop caring about that at some point. And did want to make a difference. I did love being at the top when I was in my career. And I thought that was a pretty great feeling. I knew I got there for hard work. It didn't fall in my lap, but it was a pretty great feeling when you were at the top. So I will take the compliment. Thank you very much. I have worked very hard. I still work very hard. And I took some risks that paid off. And the whole process is really interesting. And people do say to me, my friends, they're like, oh my God, 10 minutes with you and I think I can do anything. I go, that's half the battle.
One of the most important things for your listeners to take away is that you can't replicate somebody else. You can't be Becky Fawcett, okay?
Yeah.
You can't be Jack Maggot. I tell my clients, this is within my personality. I can get away with this. You can't, and it makes you feel uncomfortable. But you've got to be able to figure out within your personality what is going to work, what's going to make sense, what's going to be your drivers. I worked on Colgate-Palmolive. Colgate was very smart. They were willing to be number 2 in every product category that Procter & Gamble was number 1. Again, nobody can out Fawcett, okay? But there's enough space out there for a lot of women that can say, you know what? I love what she does, but I want to do something different. I don't want to be her. I want some of her attributes. How do I get there? And that's the conversation we're having. You can get there, people. Okay, men, women, anybody, you can get there. You got to do the work. You got to do the due diligence.
You have to want it. You have to really want it. And
Exactly.
I do love, so it is funny. So if once in a while I get I want to be you. And I'm like, the world cannot handle 2 of us. Let me be perfectly clear. So that's not going to work. But when other women come to me and say, I watch you on social media. I'm watching what you're doing and you inspire me to be better. You inspire me to do something. You inspire me to whatever. I love that because I'm in this with everybody. I always say I'm with this. We're all together and there's plenty of room for everybody to have success. And I love cheering my friends on. I love cheering you on. I love doing this podcast because now I get to feature some of my great friends and their amazing accomplishments in ways that I haven't been able to do through my nonprofit work because it's not the right place. But this is. And everything comes back to help us adopt because that's my life, which is all very cool. But we have time for one last question. And I have a good one for you that I'm catching you off guard with this one because I know that you know it. Someone's listening to this and they're going, oh my God, I'm so stuck. I'm paralyzed. What's the one thing that they can do today that's maybe the one, obviously, it's not that easy. Nothing's that easy. And if anybody tells you it is, that's ridiculous. But what's the first thing they have to do to get unstuck?
The first thing that I would recommend, and again, this is one of my many questions, is I would answer this question. If you left this world today, what would people miss? And that answer is going to give you the direction and the insight and the motivation to say, I'm viable, I'm valuable, I've got something that the world is going to miss. That's where I would start.
You crack me up. And this is why we're friends, because you know what I always tell people? Seriously, write your obituary.
Yeah, same thing.
What do you want it to read? And what do you want your tombstone to say? Because I know what I want mine to. And there are people look at me, they're like, what? I go, seriously. Do you want your obituary to say? And she was stuck. She didn't follow her dreams. What do you want it to say? Write it. Not an easy thing.
Yep.
The fact that you said, what will people, it's so similar. It's so good. See, we always joke that Jack and I joke that we should start our own business together, but it might not happen, Jack. But you're stuck with me forever as a friend and a collaborator and a coffee partner forever. And
you make my heart smile in terms of who you are and what you do. And I'm very proud that you are who you are.
Thank you so much for being here today. And I think we'll have to do down the road a second episode. And I hope we get a lot of comments and interesting questions asked when this airs and hits the waves. Tell everybody where they can find you.
So you can find my website is findingnext.guru. Findingnext.guru. That's me.
And are you on social media?
On everything. TikTok, Insta, Facebook, LinkedIn.
It should be Faceagram.
Faceagram, right?
Let's be honest.
We just created a new business.
Maybe that's the next big thing, Faceagram. 30 Seconds with Becky Fawcett. So in that episode with my friend Jack, which is part of my founder story for Help Us Adopt, I think one of the most important things that took me a long time to learn, especially after that horrific episode of almost getting fired from my dream job at Philadelphia Magazine, is that I needed to trust in my ability because I know what my ability is. And the world will tell you time and time again that you can't. That's what the world's job is all the time. You can't do this. You're not good enough. You can't do it. But I knew differently. You probably know differently. And you have to believe. I saw a void in the adoption world. It was a big void. I knew how to fix the void. I stepped in and I stepped up because I believed I could do it. I didn't know exactly what that was going to look like. But I believed it was worth the risk. And here we are 18 years later. I'm glad I believed in my ability. Guess what? I still do. There's more to come. 30 Seconds with Becky Fawcett. Thank you for listening to the Fawcett Report. I'm so glad you were here today. And here's to seeing the world a little differently and possibly using your voice to make a difference. You can follow the Fawcett Report on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. And you can message me on Instagram or Facebook. And I will actually respond as long as you're not mean. You can disagree with me. You can share your point of view, but you can't be mean because I don't do mean. And finally, if you're curious about my adoption advocacy and family building work through helpusadopt.org, you can find us there on Instagram and Facebook, as well as through the website, helpusadopt.org. See you next time.